The bottle makes a sound when you shake it. You know the one. That dry rattle of capsules against plastic. The sound of a promise you bought in good faith. It's early. The cabinet door is open, and the light catches a row of amber jars. Nad boosters. Enemen. En. You pick one up, twist the cap, and count. Not because you don't know how many are left. You count because counting is the ritual now. The way a man checks his insurance papers in a drawer he hopes he'll never open. 42 left. Enough for 6 weeks. You feel something settle. Coverage intact. And then you catch your own reflection in the mirror. The slight gray under the eyes. The skin sitting a little looser at the jaw than it did last spring. And a thought arrives, uninvited, cold as the tile under your bare feet. What if the answer was never on that shelf at all? Here's what I mean. Everything in that cabinet is built on the same quiet assumption that aging is a chemistry problem you fix from the outside in. Swallow the right molecule, refill the right jar, stay disciplined while your friends laugh at the pill organizer on your counter. And you did all of it right. You read the studies. You spent the money. So why do you feel older than ever? Because there's a layer underneath the chemistry, and almost nobody points to it. The law of vibration says everything in you, every cell, every tissue, every thought you wake up carrying, holds a frequency. And the state you live in most hours of most days isn't neutral. The low hum of worry you carry to that cabinet each morning, the quiet fear that drives the counting, that vibration is information your body reads and answers. You can flood your system with the perfect molecule and still broadcast decay underneath it. This is where biohacking stops being a shelf of bottles and becomes something you actually steer. The law of attraction isn't a slogan here. It's the simple, uncomfortable fact that the state you hold tends to return to you in the body as much as anywhere else. You've been managing the supplements. You haven't been managing the signal. That's what I'm going to walk you through before this video ends. Not a new bottle to buy. The mechanism beneath the capsules. The one that decides how fast you age more than anything in that cabinet ever could. Close the door for now. Leave the jars where they are. The thing aging you isn't on that shelf. It's in the state you carry to it. Maybe you felt it this week. That small tightening behind the sternum when another health headline reached you. The low hum of dread that you might be doing the wrong thing with your body, your time, your money. Hold on to that feeling. We're going to do something useful with it. There's a lab at the edge of a parking lot in Seattle. Gray light through the windows. The kind of building you drive past 1,000 times and never notice. Inside it, a scientist named Charles Brenner has spent the better part of his career studying a single molecule. Not 3 letters that, this month, started showing up where they'd never been. On the morning shows, in the health segment's wedge between the recipe and the forecast, in the conversations you have here at the pharmacy counter. And what Brenner said plainly into a microphone was this: slow down. Not stop, slow down. He looked at the boom, the supplements, the 4 drips, the clinics opening in strip malls and downtown high-rises across the country, and said, in the careful language of a man who measures things for a living, that the proof isn't there yet. Because this is where it gets strange. While that certainty is the hardest thing in the world to sell, which is exactly why nobody's selling it. So here's what you do with that. 3 things you can carry into any health claim that comes at you next. First, Ask mice or humans. If the evidence lives in animals and the product lives on a shelf, that gap is yours to keep, not theirs to close for you. Second, ask whether you're treating a signal or a symptom, whether the thing declining is the problem or the body's honest readout of it. Third, and this is the one that protects you most, notice who profits from your urgency. Real science can wait for proof. A sales line cannot, which is why it always whispers now. Do those 3 things and the dread loosens because you're no longer guessing, you're checking. That's the shift. The news this week didn't change between the skeptic and the buyer. Only the footing changed. And footing is something you can build deliberately before the next headline ever reaches you. You don't have to be the smartest person watching the boom roll past. You only have to be the one standing on ground you chose. The bottle sits in the bathroom cabinet, white cap, foil seal still unbroken under the lid. You read the label twice before you bought it. Knocked. 3 letters that promise to give something back. Restores what time takes. Recharges the cell from the inside. And for a moment, standing in that aisle under the buzzing light, you let yourself believe it. Why wouldn't you? The words were clean. The promise was specific. Let me tell you what's actually inside that capsule and why it sounded so good that you reached for your wallet before your judgment caught up. NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, is real. It's not a marketing invention. It's a molecule sitting inside nearly every cell you have, and it does something that matters. It carries energy. It helps the cell turn food into fuel, helps it repair its own damaged code. And here's the part that built the whole industry. As the years pass, the level of it inside you falls. Measurably. That's not a lie. That's the foundation the entire boom is standing on. So the logic seems airtight. Levels drop, you age. Put the levels back, you reverse the drop. Clean arithmetic, the kind of equation a tired man wants to believe at the end of a long week. But notice the gap that logic jumps over. Almost everything we know about raising NAD and watching something improve, sharper energy, repaired tissue, a body that behaves younger, came from mice. Aged mice, in clean cages, genetically near identical, fed the same pellets, living a controlled 24 months. You give that mouse an NAD precursor, and yes, things light up. The grip gets stronger. The metabolism perks. The data is genuinely striking. And then somewhere between that cage and your bathroom cabinet, a word quietly changed. It worked in mice became it works. The mouse left the sentence. You were slipped into its place. Here is what doesn't survive the trip. You are not a genetically identical animal in a clean cage. You're a 63-year-old man with 40 years of living in you. Old injuries, a complicated liver, a particular gut, medications that argue with each other, a history no mouse ever carried. The human trials that exist are small, short. Some show the level rising in your blood and almost nothing else moving. The number climbs on the spreadsheet. The man holding the spreadsheet feels the same. And that's the thing nobody prints on the foil seal. Raising the level is not the same as raising the life. The marketing collapsed two different events into one word, and you were never shown the scene. Now, feel what rises when you understand that. It isn't disappointment exactly. Disappointment is soft. This is sharper. This is the specific heat of a man who took something seriously, who read the label twice, who did the responsible thing, and then discovers the claim was still just a wager, still a maybe dressed as a certainty. That's a particular kind of anger, not the anger of being fooled by something obvious, the anger of being earnest in good faith, and finding out earnestness was the lever they pulled. You gave the thing your trust because you're the kind of person who pays attention. And they counted on that trust to close the sale. Sit close to that feeling because it's telling you something true about how the world reaches you now. The bet wasn't really on the molecule. The bet was on your hope that you'd want this badly enough to fill the empty space in the data with your own wanting. Hope is the cheapest ingredient in that bottle and the most expensive one to you. But watch what happens the moment you name it plainly. The molecule may help. It may do little. The honest answer is we don't fully know yet, and a grown man can hold that. What you can stop doing is handing your inner state to a promise that hasn't earned it. The bottle doesn't get to set your pulse. Here's the tool, and it's plainer than any capsule. Stand in that bathroom a moment. Feel the cool tile under your feet, the faint smell of soap, the hum of the light overhead. Notice your jaw, the man who swallows the capsule braced, shoulders tight, breath shallow, checking each morning for proof that isn't coming, keeps his body in a low, steady alarm. That state runs its own chemistry. Cortisol up, sleep thinner, digestion grudging. The man who sets the bottle down, lets his shoulders drop, breathes once all the way out and leaves the question open, he's already changed something the pill was promising. Not magic, just the plain fact that the state you live in shapes the body you live in. That second man isn't being naive. He simply refused to let an unproven thing govern a real one, the texture of his own day. So here's what I'd leave on the cabinet shelf, next to that unbroken seal. Keep the hope. It costs you nothing. But take your steadiness back from the bottle. Tonight, when you brush your teeth, let your breath go all the way out and notice you were already stronger than the label promised to make you. You already know the headline. You saw it this morning, or if someone sent it to you, and your chest did that thing it does now. That small tightening, the breath that goes shallow before you've even finished the sentence. The news this week that scientists have mapped how innate decline accelerates cellular aging. The studies, the fresh round of coverage promising we're closer than ever to slowing the clock. And I want to be honest with you about what's real in that and what's being sold, because you deserve the truth before you deserve the comfort of it. So let me name the thing first. The dread. The low exhaustion of opening your phone and being told, again, that your body is running out of time and someone has the bottle that fixes it. That feeling is not nothing. Hold on to it. We're going to do something with it. Here's what's actually true, the part measured in labs that have no product to sell you. Inside every cell, the muscle that lifts the grocery bag, the neuron firing as you read this, there's a molecule doing relentless, invisible work. Not. Think of it as what the cell spins. Every repair your body makes while you sleep, every strand of damaged DNA stitched back together in the dark gets paid for with it. And across the decades of a life, that supply falls. By some measures, cut roughly in half by the time the gray arrives at your temples. The repairs that used to happen overnight start to wait until morning, then next week, then not at all. That part is real. That's why the news lands. That's why the pitch. Restore your NAD. Restore your youth. Find a soft place in you. The decline is genuine. You feel it in the way a bad night now costs you 3 days. But here's what the headline skips and the packaging leaves in the dark. Swallowing the coin is not the same as spending it where it's needed. There's a process your body runs called first-pass metabolism. When you take a capsule of an NAD precursor, it doesn't sail untouched into your weary cells. It goes to your gut. It goes to your liver. And much of it gets dismantled, used up, converted long before it reaches the tissue you were worried about. The liver takes its cut first. What's left over, diminished, rerouted, is what continues on toward everywhere else. So you can watch a number climb in your bloodstream. Take a test, see NAD levels rise, feel that small electric satisfaction of having done something. The rise can be real, but blood is the front gate. It is not proof the package reached the house at the end of the road. The aching knee, the tired heart muscle, the slow-firing neuron. The brain sits behind a wall of its own, and what crosses that wall is a different question entirely, one the cheerful coverage never raises. I'm not telling you the molecule is a hoax. The science underneath is genuinely interesting. It's just unfinished, the way most honest things are. That NAD falls is settled. That a pill puts it back exactly where the falling did the damage. That sentence is still being written, ink wet. And here's what nags at me. And I think it nags at you too, even before you have the words. If filling the pocket were as simple as a capsule with breakfast, the falling would already be solved. It isn't. which means your body is holding onto a rule we've barely started to read. Some logic about when and where and under what conditions it chooses to spend itself on repair instead of just survival. So sit with that for a moment, because this is where the news stops and your life begins. A cell doesn't repair on command. It repairs under conditions. And you are not separate from the conditions your body lives inside. The stress you carry, the dread you woke up with this morning, the constant low signal you broadcast that the world is dangerous and you are running out. That is the climate your cells are spending in. You cannot swallow your way out of the state you keep generating. Here is the question I want to leave in your hands tonight. The one no bottle can answer for you. The world keeps handing you headlines built to make you feel like time is the enemy and your body is already losing. You receive that. You take it in again and again, and your whole system organizes around it. So what would change in the cell that has to repair you? What would become possible if you stopped receiving the world as a threat and started meeting it as something you're still quietly in conversation with? You know the feeling before you can name it. That tightness that sits high in the chest, the one that's there when you wake and still there when you finally lie down, the sense that you're behind on something you can't quite see. You've been carrying it so long, it stopped feeling like a mood and started feeling like the temperature of being you. Hold that. We'll come back to it because today's news is about it, even though the news doesn't know that yet. Here's what crossed my desk. A widely covered supplement trial reported that the compound raised NAD levels in the blood of the people taking it. And that part is true. You can measure it, draw blood before, draw it after, run the number, and it climbs. The headlines ran with it. Longevity in a capsule. The molecule did what it was sold to do. So why? The story doesn't ask, did so many people 6 weeks and feel exactly the same? I used to take that personally. Wrong dose, wrong brand, wrong hour of the morning. It took me too long to see I'd asked the wrong question. I kept staring at the pill. The answer was never in the pill. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Renata, because her case is the part the label leaves off. She did everything right, the clean protocol, the blood work, the discipline. Her NAD number rose. She felt nothing. And when she described her days to me, the reason walked right in. Jaw set, breath shallow, shoulders riding high without ever being told to. Months of bracing. Her body was flooded with one message. Not now, conserve, defend. And into that climate she was pouring fuel. A cell doesn't read intentions. It doesn't know what you paid or hoped. It reads the signals washing past its wall, telling it what kind of world it lives in. In a body braced for threat, the energy machinery runs in triad. The fuel arrives. The fire never gets lit. Renata's blood said abundance. Her body had decided the world was dangerous and acted accordingly. This is where the channel's whole idea earns its keep. The law of vibration says a thing tends to draw to itself more of whatever it is already broadcasting. And your body is broadcasting every second in a language of stress hormones and breath. The news of a longevity breakthrough lands in two people at once. One receives it braced, scanning for the catch, certain the good thing won't be for them. The other receives it open, willing to believe building is possible. Same headline, two different states. And the state, not the substance, decides what the news becomes inside them. I watch Renata change one thing first, not the supplement. The reception. She started meeting each day's information, good and bad, from rest instead of guard. Slower breath that reached the bottom of the lungs. The deliberate assumption that she was safe enough to build. Weeks later, the same compound, the same dose, finally did something because the furnaces had stopped rationing. The research has been hinting at this in plain sight. Studies on fasting show benefit appearing not because something was added, but because the body finally received the all-clear to stop defending and start maintaining. Chronically activated cells burn through their own repair resources faster than calm ones. You can pour in fuel all day. A body convinced it's under threat spends it on a war that isn't happening. Week and felt it land somewhere behind your sternum. A new study out of the journal Health Psychology, picked up quietly by a few outlets, ignored by most, put a number on something you've probably suspected for years without saying it out loud. Researchers ran what's called an open-label trial on side effects, and the finding was blunt enough to make you put your coffee down. The expectation of harm produced the harm, not the drug, the dread. Here's what they actually did because the substance matters. They took patients on identical medication, same dose, same compound, no difference in the chemistry at all, and split them into two groups. One group was handed the pill with calm, plain reassurance. The other got a long, careful recitation of everything that might go wrong. The second group reported dramatically more side effects. Real ones, measurable ones. The body manufactured the harm it had been taught to expect. Same molecule, two different stories told around it. And if you're 45 or older, taking something every morning to hold the line against time, this should stop you where you stand. Because the vial on your counter is not a neutral object. It arrives wrapped in a story. And the story you tell yourself as you swallow it may be doing more to your physiology than the molecule inside. Think about how you actually take these things. You unfold the insert, that thin, almost translucent paper, the print small enough that you angle it toward the window. And you read, possible interactions, rare events, the clause that says consult your physician. Your jaw sets a little. Your breath goes shallow without your noticing. And before the capsule has even touched water, your body has received a signal, not from the compound, but from you. A signal that says, this could be a threat. That same open-label research points at why it bites so deep. Anticipation alone shifts the body's chemistry. Not the danger arriving, the waiting for it, the vigilance. and it gets there first. So the honest question the headline hands you isn't whether to keep taking what's on your counter. The bottles line up on the counter like a small congregation. You know the arrangement by heart now. The NAD precursor on the left, the magnesium glycinate beside it, the fish oil that smells faintly of the ocean when the cap comes off, the powder that has to be stirred, not shaken, or it clumps at the bottom of the glass. There's a ritual to it, a small clink of pill against ceramic, the hiss of the kettle, the phone propped against the sugar bowl, already showing last night's sleep score in a color that decides, before you've had a single sip of anything, whether the day is allowed to feel like a win. And here is the strange thing about that scene. It looks like discipline. It feels most mornings like care. But somewhere along the way, the care became a job. A second job, unpaid, with no clear hours and no day off. You clock in before the coffee. You file your reports to an app. You manage a body the way a tired manager runs a plant that keeps missing quota, walking the floor, checking the gauges, wondering why the output won't lift no matter how many adjustments you make. Let me say what that actually costs, because nobody puts it on the label. There's a tiredness that doesn't come from doing too little. It comes from monitoring, from the constant low-grade surveillance of your own decline. The man who tracks every variable is never off the clock with his own mortality. He's filed it, charted it, set an alarm for it. And the body, which evolved to read your state, not your spreadsheet, receives all that vigilance as a message. Not the message you intended. The message it hears is, something here is wrong, and it needs watching. Think about what watching actually means to an animal. You don't surveil what's safe. You surveil the tree line at dusk. You scan the water for the shape under the surface. The act of measuring, performed often enough, with enough quiet fear underneath it, becomes its own signal, a standing posture of threat that the body holds even while you sleep. So the sleep score comes back poor, and you respond by measuring harder. And the measuring is the very thing degrading the number you're chasing. That's the loop. The effort feeding the problem it was hired to solve. I want to be precise here, because this isn't an argument against knowing things. There's a difference between a man who checks his pulse once and one who checks it 40 times. And the difference isn't the data. It's the relationship. One is gathering information. The other is interrogating a witness he doesn't trust. And the body, after years of being treated like a suspect, stops volunteering anything good. There was a study out of the world of pain medicine, not longevity, pain, that found people who catastrophized about a sensation reported far worse outcomes than people with the identical physical injury who simply let the sensation be. Same tissue, same nerves, different relationship to the signal. The watching itself was a variable. It moved the result. Now, carry that into the kitchen with the bottles. Every supplement on that counter is an attempt to add something. More precursor, more building blocks, more raw material for repair. And maybe some of it helps. But none of it touches the thing draining you faster than any deficiency, which is the part of you that never gets to stand down. The sentry who's been on duty so long he's forgotten there was ever peacetime. You can't supplement your way out of state. You can only supplement your way deeper into the illusion that the state isn't the issue. So here's the question I'd leave sitting on the counter beside the pills, where you'll see it tomorrow morning before the kettle sings. What if the discipline isn't the problem, and the laziness was never the risk, but the watchfulness is? What if the body you're trying so hard to save reads your effort as alarm, and quietly ages to match it? Not because you did too little, because some part of you never once believed it was safe to stop. We're going to follow that thread, the watching, the state underneath it, and what changes when the sentry is finally told the war is over. Because the most measurable thing in that kitchen was never on the screen. It was the man holding the phone. You know, the tiredness that doesn't match the calendar. You did everything the longevity world told you to. You read the labels. You compared the milligrams. You paid extra for the version that wasn't cut with filler. The vial sits on the counter now, catching the kitchen light. A powder the color of bone, pure, certified, flawless under any microscope you could point at it. And still, on a Tuesday evening, drying the last dish, you feel older than the man you were when you started. Here is the thing the longevity aisle has no margin in admitting. The molecule was rarely the deciding factor. I learned this slowly, watching two men I know, same age, same town, same doctor, near identical blood work. They take the same supplement, bought from the same shelf. One of them is aging the way you'd expect from the brochure. The other looks like the years are pressing down harder, and his numbers, the ones underneath the surface, agree. The pill is identical. The body receiving it is not. Because the body is not reading the milligram count. It's reading the atmosphere. Your cells are eavesdropping every second on the state you're living in, the tension you carry through the grocery store, the way your jaw sets when the news comes on, the breath you hold without noticing. And they adjust to match what they hear. A body that has spent the day braced is a body that has quietly decided the world is dangerous, and it runs its repair and its housekeeping accordingly. Conservatively, defensively, like a town under curfew. So the supplement goes in perfect, pristine, expensive, but it arrives into that braced body, into a system already locked towards survival. The cells receive the molecule the way a tired man receives good advice at the end of a brutal shift. Technically present, practically useless. Meanwhile, the calmer man's cells, hearing safety, keep doing their work like nothing is wrong. Same coffee, same headlines, same economy pressing on both of them. Different signal sent down into the tissue. That's the part that rearranges everything, if you let land. The longevity boom found what might help and built an entire economy around it, while ignoring the thing that decides whether the help can do anything at all. The climate you're feeding those cells, hour after hour, with the way you move through your own days. And this is where it gets strangely freeing, because that climate is not on the invoice. It can't be. The most powerful input into how your body ages is the one thing no clinic can bottle and no founder can monopolize: the quality of the state you keep while you live. Think of the two men again. The first drinks his morning coffee bracing for what the day might take from him, signaling threat to 40 trillion cells before he's out the door. The headline and felt that small drop in your stomach. Another study, another expert, another thing you're apparently doing wrong with your sleep. Beneath the data, a quieter dread. If even rest has become a performance you can fail, where exactly are you supposed to recover? But buried in the coverage was a detail, and that part cannot be fooled by a cool room or a tracker on your finger. It reads your state. It reads whether you're still gripping. The principle older than any sleep study, and the science is everything is handled once the list is empty, once we've earned it. So we push, we control, we tighten our grip on the day, believing that if we hold hard enough, we'll force the outcome we want. And every hour spent in that grip is an hour the repair work stays locked outside. Calm isn't the luxury you allow yourself after the real work. calm is the condition that makes the real work possible. There's a feeling you might recognize. The breath that slows not because you decided to slow it, but because for a moment you actually felt safe. Last night, I noticed it. The radiator ticking as the heat came up. The longevity money might be smaller and stranger than the experts suggest. Not how do I do more, but what am I still holding that the body cannot heal around? It starts before you're even awake. That low hum of dread you've learned to call normal. The bracing that arrives a half second before your eyes open. You've come this far in your life to learn something no label can print. A substance can be working perfectly inside your cells and still arrive into a body that's clenched against the whole day. The powder is real. The pathway it feeds is real. None of that was a lie, but it lands somewhere, and where it lands changes everything. That's the gap nobody talks about. The molecules of repair don't move at full strength in a system that lives in low alarm. The same in AD, The same enzymes behave differently depending on the weather you're standing in. So the honest question stops being which jar, which dose, which brand. It becomes something quieter and harder to put on a shelf. Not what am I taking, but what state am I taking it into? Think about how you actually move through a Tuesday. You wake already leaning forward into the things you owe. You check the phone before your feet touch the floor, and the screen hands you 6 small emergencies that aren't yours, and your body answers all of them as if they were. By the time you swallow the capsule, the floor of you is already tilted. The supplement does its small job. The state undoes it before lunch. So here's where the shift lives. I'm not going to tell you to feel different on command. Seasons. So the tools, when they come, don't look like tools. They look like a slower exhale when the headline lands. They look like the decision, made once and kept, that the first 20 minutes of your yesterday, maybe the day before, widely reported on NAD, the molecule your cells burn to make energy, and how its levels fall as you age. The reporting was clean enough. Researchers, a journal, a number on a watched 2 people receive that exact sentence. Both swallow the same small white capsule the next morning, the same compound the study discussed, the same too warm tap water because the faucet runs slow before 8. Same chemistry going down both throats. The first takes it the way you take a breath at the top of a hill. A small punctuation in a day, already moving. He read the headline, filed it as a fact, gave it the weight a fact deserves, and let it go. The dog needs walking. There's a thing at noon. The capsule is a quiet vote of confidence cast and forgotten. He doesn't audit himself at lunch to see if it's working. The trust, body remembers that far more faithfully than it remembers any supplement. A number from a doctor, a friend's diagnosis at a dinner table, the candle guttering, the wine gone warm. The information is neutral cargo. Whether it ages you or merely informs you depends on whether you receive it from quiet trust or anxious surveillance. And that choice is trainable, the way a muscle is. So you train it. You feel the clench arrive, and you don't obey it. You let the fact be a fact and refuse at the stopwatch. You practice the open hand on small things, the headline, the capsule, the morning ache, so the hand already knows the shape when the large thing comes. The world will keep handing you things. Capsules, headlines, numbers, warnings, the slow accounting of a long life. You don't get to choose most of what arrives. You never did. But the state it lands in, the field your cells read and answer, that has always been the part with your name on it. And the strange, almost unfair truth is that the man who worries less about whether it's working is usually the one it works for. Not because worry is forbidden, because worry is a signal and the body is always listening. The receipt for the bottle is still in your wallet, folded against a gas station stub and an old appointment card. $300 for 90 capsules. And somewhere in the fine print a promise about cellular energy, about the engines inside you running cleaner, longer. You bought it. And here's the part nobody warned you about. You didn't just buy the powder. You bought a new way of watching yourself. Because the next morning you woke up and the first thing you did wasn't to feel the light coming through the blinds. It was to ask, is it working yet? You stood at the bathroom mirror looking for evidence. You read your own face like a stock ticker. Was that the coffee in your hand goes cold because you forgot your whole day. Money buys into a body that is bracing 40 times an hour, and you'll feel the cost long before you ever feel the cure. So here's what nobody selling you longevity will say out loud. The bottle is downstream. The state you're in when the world enters you, that's upstream. And upstream is where the river is actually moving. Think about a man working a metal lathe. The danger isn't only the spinning blade. The danger is the operator who flinches at every spark, who jerks the wrist at every sound, who tenses so hard he can't feel the work in his own hands anymore. The skilled one isn't reckless. He sees every spark. He just doesn't let each one move him. He stays loose at the place where the metal meets the tool. That looseness is not weakness. It's the only thing that keeps his fingers. You're the operator. The news is the spark. And for years, decades, nobody told you that you get to choose the state in which the spark lands. This is not pretending the headline isn't real. The numbers are real. The world is heavy, and it is not going to apologize for being heavy. But there is an enormous, almost embarrassing difference between watching the storm through the window and standing out in it with your collar open, soaking every drop into your skin as if absorbing more of it made you braver. It doesn't make you braver. It just makes you wet and cold and slowly worn down at the cellular level by a rain that was never going to stop for you. Building your longevity, then, doesn't begin with a pill at all. It begins one decision earlier than the pill. It begins with the question of what state your nervous system is in at the moment the world arrives, because that state is the doorway, and everything passes through it on the way in. So before we talk about anything you can do, I want to leave you with the thing underneath all of it. You have spent years guarding what enters your body. The food, the molecules, the careful protocols you measure out each morning. When did you last guard, with that same care, the state you were in when the day came at you? The thing about a video like this is that it ends and the news doesn't. You'll close this tab, and somewhere out there, the next report is already loading. Take the one that crossed every desk this week. A working paper out of a Stanford lab, tracking the cortisol levels of 2,000 adults against their daily news intake. The finding, stripped of its hedging, was blunt. People who consumed breaking news for more than an hour a day showed stress markers comparable to those of subjects a decade older. Different result inside the body. That distinction is the whole reason this channel exists. A body that was never built to hold a continent's worth of bad news at once. That's the version of you the aging machine feeds on. Not the years, the state. So what I'm offering, and this is the only thing I'll ask of you in this whole video, that not you'd stopped noticing you were carrying. If for even a few minutes the weight of getting older felt less like a verdict and more like a thing you have some quiet say over, then you already know what I'm talking about. You felt gain from your wear. That's where we go next. The cabinet still opens the same way. You know the sound, that small suck of the door, the rattle of glass against glass as the shelf shifts. Amber bottles, white caps, the afternoon light catching labels you've read so many times the words have stopped meaning anything. Nacht, Enemen, Resveratrol, the morning ones on the left, the evening ones on the right, reorder dates penciled on the lids in your own handwriting. And the count. You remember the count. 41 capsules left in the big bottle, and the arithmetic running underneath it. 11 days, then the reorder, then the charge clearing the account, then the small clutch in the chest when you wondered again whether any of it was doing a single measurable thing. Stand at that cabinet now. The same shelf, the same bottles, the same flat afternoon light. But something in you has gone quiet that used to be loud. Because somewhere in the last hour, you understood the thing those bottles could never tell you. The body was never reading the label. It was reading you. The state you carried into the room. The thing your breath was doing before you noticed it doing anything, whether the morning's report left you braced for impact or simply informed. The body has been listening to all of that, to the whole shape of how you move through a given day, far longer and far more faithfully than it has ever listened to anything you swallowed. That's not a verdict against the bottles. Take them or don't. But notice what just happened to your grip on them. It loosened. The clutch that used to live in the count, 11 days, then the charge, then the doubt. It isn't there right now. You're looking at a cabinet, not a lifeline. A shelf of things that might help a little instead of the barrier you imagined holding back the years. The count was never the decisive thing. The decisive thing doesn't fit in a bottle, and it doesn't have a reorder date. You've been carrying it the whole time, in the way you receive a hard morning, in what you let your attention chew on between the headlines, in whether you meet bad news already flinching or simply standing there, taking it in, letting it pass through without setting up residence. That is the protocol, not the one penciled on the lids, the one written in how you live. And here's where the lightness comes from. Not from a promise, not from a number, but from a simple shift in where the power was sitting. You spent years believing the most important variable was out there, on a shelf, behind a price, arriving in a box on a Tuesday. And it turns out the input the body honors most completely was the one closest to you the whole time. The cheapest, the most ignored, the one no one could sell you, because you were already the only one who had it. So close the cabinet, or leave it open. It matters less than it did an hour ago. But carry one thing out of this room with you. Not as an answer. I don't have one to hand you, and I wouldn't trust the man who did. Carry it as a question, the kind that keeps working long after the screen goes dark. If the body responds to the state and not to the capsule, if it has spent every one of these years registering the climate you live in rather than the supplement you swallow, then the question isn't whether the pills work. The question is what else has been in the room the whole time. The thing you've been pouring into yourself, day after day, in your reactions, your braced shoulders, you're half listening to the noise of the hour. What have you been growing in there quietly while you believe the work was happening on a shelf? You don't have to answer tonight, but you'll feel it moving in you tomorrow, the next time you reach for the door and hear that small suck of glass against glass, and find, to your surprise, that you're reaching with a lighter hand.